you need the. Oh, look. Yeah.
Just the one missing.
You get between 2 and 6, so I'll check that.
Okay. 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the December 2nd DeSoto City Council meeting to order. We'll start with roll call, please.
Lane.
Here.
Daniels.
Here.
Hannemeyer.
Here.
Ritter.
Here.
Murdoch.
Here.
All are present.
Okay, thank you. We'll invite you all to rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our first item tonight is to swear in our newly elected mayor and council members. So Brandon, how do we want to do that?
Yes, Mayor. We'll go up to the podium and swear in the newly elected members. We'll start with you, Mayor Rick Walker. And
Okay.
we'll go in alphabetical order. So we'll do Rob Daniels and Kevin Hannemeyer.
Okay,
All right. Give me 1 second. I'll be down there.
all right. We're gonna do a selfie when we're done. Oh, push the button on the podium mic, would you?
Yeah, I'll get close.
Over here like that.
All right. Raise your right hand.
All right.
I state your name.
I, Rick Walker,
Do hereby solemnly affirm
do hereby solemnly affirm
that I will faithfully uphold the Constitution of the United States
that I will faithfully uphold the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas
in the performance of my duties.
in the performance of my duties.
I will faithfully and impartially perform all the duties of the elected mayor of the city of DeSoto, Kansas.
I will, let's go, split that
Yeah.
down.
I will faithfully and impartially perform all of the duties
I will faithfully and impartially perform all the duties
of an elected mayor of the city of DeSoto,
of
Kansas,
the elected mayor of the city of DeSoto, Kansas,
under pains and penalty of perjury.
under pains and penalty of perjury.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Raise your right hand, there you go. Raise your right hand, yeah. I do solemnly affirm
I do solemnly affirm
that I will faithfully uphold the Constitution of the United States
that I will faithfully uphold the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas
in the performance of my duties.
in the performance of my duties.
I will faithfully and impartially perform all the duties
I will faithfully and impartially perform all of the duties
of an elected council member
of an elected council member
of the city of DeSoto,
of
Kansas,
the city of DeSoto, Kansas,
under pains and penalty of perjury.
under pains and penalty of perjury.
Congratulations. I do hereby solemnly affirm
Do hereby solemnly affirm
that I will faithfully uphold the Constitution of the United States
that I will faithfully uphold the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of
and
Kansas
the Constitution of the State of Kansas
in the performance of my
in
duties.
the performance of my duties.
I will faithfully and impartially perform all the duties
I will faithfully and impartially perform all of the duties
of an elected council member
of an elected council member
of the city of DeSoto,
of the
Kansas,
city of DeSoto, Kansas,
under pains and penalty of perjury.
under the pains and penalties
Parker.
All right, Rick, Rob, come on up. You gotta get a swearing selfie. You too.
All right, I get it, all right.
I think I can do this.
Do you want to do the selfie?
I'm gonna do the selfie.
Yeah,
You,
okay.
you want a legitimate
I want
picture?
to maybe a
Yeah,
little
I was gonna
yeah.
get one after the meeting, but we can do this one too,
Where-
I guess.
which
Yeah.
way?
Do it now.
I think,
Yeah,
move
yeah,
right
right
here.
here,
Yeah,
yeah, in front of the seal, yeah.
in front of this.
Yeah, Mayor's in the center. Don't know why I'm here, but okay.
You were key to this
Yeah.
installation there, Brandon.
Okay, you guys were all just smiling, so I've already got the best picture on
Okay. All right. Now hang on. Now we got to do the whole.
The swear-in.
Whitney wants the swearing selfie.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
hang on. All right, I'll get in here. Okay, there's a good one. Now, come on now. Come on now. A little more fun than that. All right.
I saw that one, good.
Okay, our next item is a public hearing relating to the issuance of $20 million in industrial revenue bonds for Intervet, Inc., DBA Merck Animal Health. Any staff report on this, or do I just open the public hearing?
Just, I think, open the public hearing. Kevin Wimpy's here and he prepared most of the documents, so
Okay.
any questions?
All right, will we have a discussion item later to take action?
Action
on?
item under new
Yeah.
business. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, we will.
All right, so I'm just officially opening the public hearing on the Merck industrial revenue bonds. Anyone wish to speak to this matter at the public hearing?
Would just note that in connection with the IRBs, there is a tax abatement at level of 75% with the pilot. So just for the record, that's also will be considered later in the agenda.
Okay. Seeing no one come forward, I will close the public hearing and we'll move on. Next item is our consent agenda. We have approval of the minutes from the council meeting of November 18th and approval of pay ordinance number 915. Anyone have an issue with anything on the consent agenda or would like to make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? Roll call, please.
Lane,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Hanamichael,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Our next item is call to public. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to comment about any matter relating to city business not listed on tonight's agenda. Does anyone wish to address the council under call to public? Seeing none, we'll move on. Item 3 is old business, which we have none, so we'll go to item 4A, consider memorandum of understanding with Flint Development for the development of the Gabriel and Heitzman properties.
Mayor, I need to disclose a conflict of interest due to a business relationship with the applicant.
Okay.
So I will abstain from this item.
All right, good. And clerk's noted that Councilman Hanamichael's left the meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So now we'll carry on.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Mayor. The item before you tonight is a memorandum of understanding. Essentially, it sets the framework for a future development agreement and other future actions related to the development of a light industrial development on roughly 370 acres of land that we've always known as the Gabriel property. This has been the subject of economic development pursuits for at least a decade, and this body has had more than one discussion about pursuing different projects on that property, and it's been a target of ours really for at least a decade, shown in our comprehensive plan and infrastructure planning documents as something other than agricultural uses. Currently, its future land use plan is as light industrial with good access to K10 interchange, and all under a single ownership, really sets it apart from other areas adjacent to the city. It was included in our annexation action that we took on November 18th, so it is now in the corporate limits of the city. And we've been negotiating with the development team for this memorandum of understanding for the last several months, probably about 6 months. We started over the summer months with this. As contemplated, the agreement contemplates a tax incentive, a roughly 85% tax abatement for 10 years, and we'll get into the details of that in a little bit later. It also calls for the city to perform utility extension, upgrades, water and sewer mostly, to serve a light industrial development on the property. And then it also calls for significant, what we're calling off-site road improvements, but they're really adjacent road improvements. Complete reconstruction of Edgerton Road from K10 down to 103rd Street, intersections at that intersection of Edgerton and 103rd, and then intersection improvements at 103rd and Evening Star Road. There are funding mechanisms to make sure that all happens, and protections from the city to ensure that no city funds go toward supporting the development. The development revenues pay for those improvements. The MOU, as contemplated, is attached to your staff report, and I have outlined some particulars in the staff report, just in general terms, laying out the terms of the agreement. There's provision about zoning and land use. Of course, we cannot we can only guarantee that we will consider a rezoning application for the property. That's quasi-judicial action of the governing body, so you can't agree by agreement to rezone to a particular zoning district. So that's articulated in the MOU, but there's really no obligation on the city about that zoning. In terms of public improvements, road improvements, I did outline those just a second ago. We're estimating the cost of those improvements at around $6 million. The MOU lays out a mechanism for a benefit district, which would be a special tax on the property, just on the development property, to reimburse for the cost of those improvements. And that would be just a special benefit district. The term would be 10 years as contemplated now, to repay those bonds. Water and sewer, similarly, there will likely be water improvements that will have to be extended to the site. The uniqueness about the water situation is that it is in the service territory of Rural Water District 7, and we've been in constant contact with them throughout these negotiations, and then years before that when we entertain economic development opportunities on the site. Our stance right now is that it's in Rural 7 service territory. If they can serve it, and if they're willing to serve it in a timely manner with the appropriate capacities in place to facilitate the development, we would love for them to do that, and they could move forward with that. If they decide they don't want to, or if they can't, or if they need, if the city has to serve the property, we have outlined some public improvements, water line extensions that'll be needed to do that. Those extensions in that event would cost around $2.3 million. And the city would perform and bond for those improvements. But those bonds would be, the payment of those bonds would be guaranteed by a take-or-pay agreement that the developer would enter into with the city, whereby they would agree to either purchase a certain amount of water or pay for that amount of water so that we could repay those bonds. And the calculations are included in your staff report as to how we arrive at that amount, how much those payments would be, what fraction of our water charge goes toward production of water, and what could go toward repaying the bonds. So those are broken out. But in the end, there will be an agreement that essentially guarantees those debt service payments from the developer, in the event that they have uses out there that don't need a whole lot of water and don't generate a lot of water revenue. It's a similar story on the sewer, so we've contemplated, and you've seen the layouts of the sewer improvements that will be needed to serve the site. Again, a take or pay obligation on the part of the developer to repay for those charges. Similarly, the sewer charge is broken down. If they're actually using the sewer, we'd have to treat that water, so we couldn't use all those for debt service payments. But if they don't use it, essentially they pay the debt service. That's kind of how that take or pay would be structured. So in exchange for those, there's also, well, in addition to those provisions, there's this incentive, the tax abatement and pilot agreement. Our economic incentive policy contemplates incentivizing development on this property to the tune of an 85% level. The proposal in the MOU doesn't equate it to a straight percentage of pilot, but it equates to $1 per square foot of building constructed. This way it kind of takes that whole appraisal value out of the equation, and it guarantees a pilot that's directly related to how much building is out there. So there were calculations that we had to make to try and arrive at what is that appropriate pilot per square foot, and how do you relate that to a percentage of abatement. And I provided those as Exhibit D to the staff report. I do want to mention that I did, or actually the applicant recognized an error in that spreadsheet that I've corrected now. And the error comes in the assessed value per square foot of tax. I had a number that was around 10 in there. The true number is around 13.39. So in terms of percentage abatement, in that pilot table that's in the MOU, contemplates two pilot payments. One pilot payment would be applicable to distribution and warehouse uses, and another pilot payment would be applicable to production type uses. And the reason for that is because we think those production type uses are more favorable, more beneficial, they create better jobs, they create franchise fees and those utility fees that distribution warehouse might not. So we're further incentivizing those above and beyond what we would otherwise incentivize distribution warehouse. Importantly, with the correction that was made in that spreadsheet, the pilot for non-warehouse distribution, so the pilot amount that they would have to pay if a production facility comes in, equates to an 85%. That's consistent with our incentive policy. The amount that they'd have to pay if it is a distribution warehouse is higher, and that equates to only 83%. So in terms of numbers, the pilot agreement for non-distribution, so for production type facilities, starts at 18 cents per square foot, and then goes up by 2% per year just as an inflationary factor. That's why we have the table there. The pilot for distribution warehouse begins at 23 cents a square foot and increases from there. So in very simple terms, if there's a 1 million square foot building out there and the use is distribution warehouse, they're going to pay 23 cents per square foot per year as a tax on that. So $230,000 per year on a tax on a distribution warehouse facility. If it's a production type facility, that number is only going to be $180,000. So there's roughly a 28% difference. And that's roughly the further incentive toward non-production or non-distribution warehouse type facility. So wanted to make clear in the staff report, I said that those numbers I think were 84 and 87, I believe, when we round. Those actual numbers are 83 and 85, so we didn't exceed the incentive amount on those pilot numbers. So in exchange for those incentives and the extension of public infrastructure, the developer has agreed. Obviously, it'll be in their interest. they're gonna grade the site, they'll put all the interior utilities, all the water, the roads, all the infrastructure, the sewer lines, interior to the site that you're gonna need to serve whatever development might come along. Those are costs borne by the developer. And obviously, they'll be actively pursuing economic projects for the area that will be light industrial in nature. The zoning that's contemplated is light industrial, and we actually do have a rezoning application that is scheduled for a public hearing with the Planning Commission on December 21st. So Planning Commission will be considering that rezoning to light industrial for the whole property at that time, and that'll come to you, assuming the Planning Commission makes a recommendation, that'll come to you in January. So the development opportunities that developer will be pursuing along with the EDC, pursuing those are light industrial. They'll fit into those. They may be distribution warehouse. They may be production type uses. It's hard to tell. At this time, it's hard to predict. Some of these, the development opportunities that we're seeing from the Kansas Department of Commerce and through the KCADC are probably a 50-50 mix, really, of the e-commerce and then the production. So it's difficult to say, but they'll pursue that. There's a provision in the MOU that if they haven't landed one of those projects within the first year of this agreement, that they'll build a spec building, a speculative 500,000 square foot building without a project in hopes of enticing a manufacturer or distribution or something to come. So there's an obligation, there's a commitment on the part of the developer to facilitate a project. So we're not going to do all this and have these pad sites out there and then just have it languish. So that's an obligation. Also, there's an intent to issue industrial revenue bonds, much like we've done for the Merck property. That allows sales tax on construction materials to be waived. And then there's a cap on the city fees at $500,000 associated with the development. And so that would be the act of platting, the excise tax on platting, and building permit fees. When you add all those up, those are capped at $500,000. And that represents, it could be somewhere around a $2 million incentive to the development. Most of that's excise tax that we wouldn't collect. So that's essentially the synopsis of the agreement before you. The economic finance teams has been working on this. We feel that, staff feels that this really sets a positive course for the future actions and development of the property. We recommend approval of the MOU. I would point out, Mr. Mayor, that we do have representatives from the Flint development team are here, and they've asked for a few minutes to give a presentation.
Okay. Well, if you've wrapped up yours, then I would invite them to come forward with their presentation now.
Thank you, Mike. That was a great overview. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Hunter Harris with Flint Development, located in Prairie Village, so a Kansas City-based company. My partner and I, Devin Schuster, who's with me tonight, as well as our legal representative, Corb Maxwell with the Polsonelli Law Firm. We've all been doing development work in the greater Kansas City metro community now for over a decade. What I'd like to do is just give you a brief overview of our company, what we're up to in the world, how we came about this project, and a bit of inspiration for us as we move forward. And wanted to thank staff, Mayor and others for their time over the last several months in putting this MOU together. I think it's a great outcome and a great path forward for us to set. And I can assure you that all of our collective resources on the developer side are very intent in delivering this project very successfully here in the near future.
Is that working? Nope.
Negative.
All right, I'll just forward through here. Well, I thought I would.
So again, about us, we have collectively over 50 years of experience construction resources in-house. Our primary focus at Flint is on large-scale industrial development, most all of it speculatively built in nature. And right now, we're really active from coast to coast. Boise, Idaho, the Pacific Northwest to the upper Northeast, Detroit, southern Wisconsin, down to El Paso and the South Texas markets. Sorry, slide mic.
I'll just watch your thumb and I'll know what
Thanks.
your thumb's doing.
We've developed over 40 million square feet. Our first project was a 700,000 square foot building in Liberty that abuts the Ford Claycomo plant right off of I-35. That was a site that was destined to be a lifestyle retail center. So think, department stores and J. Crew. Given the fate of retail, we worked successfully with that community to rezone and incentivize that site for what's now a very successful project, housing over 1 million square feet of industrial space, has been a tremendous engine for the community, not only from a tax generation standpoint, but also the jobs that were created and drove additional development opportunities around the site. Presently, we have over 6 million square feet, right around $500 million under construction, and by second quarter of next year, we will have under construction right around 16.5 million square feet, representing just over $1 billion in total project value. This is a map of our current projects. I won't bore you with going through each and every one of these. The two near the top that are located in the Detroit market are actually being delivered later this month, along with the project in Blue Springs. The project in Blue Springs was just under 600,000 square feet, so it'd be analogous to the 500,000 square foot building. If we were to spec it here, that completes construction on the 20th. And we have successfully leased all of that facility prior to delivering it. I can tell you of each one of these buildings and sites that you see here, every single one we've started without tenants in tow, so have all been built speculatively. Of the 3 that we're delivering, every single one will have a tenant by the time we have a temporary certificate of occupancy. So bringing that all together here, we think hopefully one of our stronger suits, as opposed to some of our competition, is we are working on a national scale. We are working with national brokerage companies who do all of our leasing. We are very keenly intent with all of the various market trends and tendencies that we are seeing. If I had to forecast, I would expect that when we grade the entire parcel, have it successfully zoned, have utilities to it, that we would be starting on more than one building. And I would also assume during that process, given our relationship with the Chamber and EDC, that will certainly bolster our successes of also landing some build-to-suit or users along the way, actually having either some product or land to deliver to the market. So as you can see here, various sizes of buildings all throughout the country, each for a different specific reason and purpose. I can tell you that our project in DeSoto will be the only active one that we will be working on in the Kansas City market. We will have no competing interests for this site. We will have our undivided attention and that of our leasing team in Newmark, a global company who will work with us hand in hand in marketing with the Chamber to attract various users. I can also tell you that we plan to close the site in cash, fund all of the grading and infrastructure to the site, as well as the road improvements in cash. So our capital is already committed to this project. We don't plan to utilize any debt until we probably go vertical with the building at a very limited amount. And our equity partner is the same for every single one of these projects on the map, and as well for this project. I'll kind of flip through these, if you will, Mike. This is just some overviews of some projects that we've recently completed here. The project in Liberty that I mentioned, similar size building. The project in Blue Springs that you can see here, very positive relationship with that community. Turned out to be a heck of a deal and it's now leased. This was a former Ford site in Pontiac, Michigan that we took, so a brownfield site, and delivered just over a 700,000 square foot building that will be fully leased at completion. This is a former GM plant that we took a part of, again, a brownfield site. The former factory was removed and we built new and have new life here. You can see here what's over a 700,000 square foot building and around 150,000 square foot building. So we're adaptable to the site and market. We can build smaller buildings if we need to build smaller buildings, larger if the case allows, or sell developed land if a user requires that, and work with them on a development. A few of our projects, just starting construction here, Texas, Virginia, and South Carolina, respectively. I'm going to bring Corb up to help me assist with a part of this presentation, but again, an outline of the primary project that we will be taking on here. Again, on our dime, we'll be completing all of the road improvements necessary for the project. Burns and McDonnell had done a preliminary due diligence report and worked with KDOT on that. So we'll be funding that. We feel really good that we're before you tonight with a request that is in compliance with your incentive policy. We are here to take the risk to develop this land and put up buildings speculatively. Our research has shown that this site, with our expertise and the participation of the city, the utilities that it offers, the logistics that it offers, from the two access points to K10, we really, really like our chances of success here and believe it is a case of if you build it, they will come. What you have here is a chart that's probably awfully difficult to read. What it shows is, what we have is a blank canvas, to be honest with you. As Sarah can attest, we turn site plans in less than 24 hours, so our team of designers and engineers are on call if there's a user or an opportunity that comes through either the chamber, the state, or KCADC. So there have probably been 50 different iterations of this since we've become the contract purchaser. We've been working with the EDC as various pursuits have come forward. The certain universal truth I would probably say is we're not succeeding is because we don't have the playing field set. So these companies, their timelines for occupancy have gone from years to a matter of months. So when their site selected and the user comes into the town, they need to see a site that's graded, they need a site that has utilities, they need a site that's properly zoned. Not all of those things will come in a matter of time. So this is the process that we've been working on. As you can see here, we have a smattering of building sizes. I can assure you will probably look nothing like this when it all comes to reality. But again, an idea of what the site can yield and how buildings can configure on it. This is some inspirational imagery that we wanted to share with you. These are either from abstracts of our projects or others that we've gravitated towards. So just a type of feel for the buildings and architecture. We like to spend extra money since we're more than likely going to put up a building speculatively to attract a tenant. And we think top quality architecture and landscaping are two of the best ways to achieve our successes outside of just having a good site and location. We hope that's evidenced by our work, both built and ongoing as well. I'll hand this over to Corb at this point, and we'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Hunter. Mayor, members of the council, Corb Maxwell, the Polsinelli Law Firm. We've been pleased to be able to represent Hunter and Devin and the whole Flint team all across the country in building out all of these exciting projects, and no project that we're more excited about than this DeSoto project of just the pure land area that we have, that 360 acres, and as Hunter said, that blank canvas. But when we take that blank canvas and we look at that site plan and we look at the fact that we're able to put nearly 4 million square feet on that site, we start to run out what are the numbers going to look like. And this is all going to be subject to users that come in and us ultimately building and getting the actual construction pricing and otherwise. So just take this all as very high level estimates, but we feel pretty good about the estimates that we've made here with the site. And what we're seeing is that this will be over a $400 million investment. When it's all said and done, between the work that Flint puts into this of going and buying the site, grading the site and investing in the infrastructure and then building that many buildings vertical, we're looking at a nearly $400 million investment in that site. That ends up creating, if you use just sort of rational estimates that we've used with economic development consultants and others all around the country, is that can end up at almost 2,000 permanent jobs that could be on the site. Now, dependent on the users, some will be lower, some will be higher. It really can fluctuate in this when you're building speculatively and you don't know who the tenant could be. Those are all just estimates, but those are good national estimates based on what you see in industrial product, is that we could end up having that 2,000 jobs. As the city knows, prior to, I think, November 18th, you've never received any money from this site whatsoever. Now that it's been annexed in, you're going to start seeing some very modest dollars flow from it when it is agricultural ground. And obviously that's going to start moving skyward as we move forward with building these buildings up here. Even during the term of the abatement, you're going to start seeing hundreds of thousands of dollars that can come in these payment in lieu of taxes. And then when we get after full completion of the facilities and you start seeing real tax base of the city grow from this site. We think that's the really exciting part, but it's significant even in the years when the abatement is going on. Hunter and I say this all the time as we talk about this, and it's now proven to be true every single time we've gone through one of these. Development begets development, right? And I know this city's had a lot of success with economic development in the past and has probably seen that, but there's nothing more powerful and transformative than you start putting up these big 500,000 square foot and 1 million square foot buildings, and that they start creating other activity. You start getting jobs, that starts needing housing, that starts needing retail, that starts needing other things that occur, and these truly do become anchors of the community with that good job base that they build. So we really believe that we're going to be a catalyst, not just for this Gabriel site that we're putting, but putting this much development, putting $400 million of investment starts to really throw off spin-off benefits to the city. Not the least of which is us bringing in all of that infrastructure, right? Opening up all of that corridor on sort of the back of this project that then allows and sets the table for that other good development to happen. And lastly, would just say this is going to be best in class industrial. I think what you saw from Hunter's representative architecture and the site plan, this is truly where the market is moving. This is where they're going. This is going to be best in class because that's what it takes today to go and lure in these tenants and have these tenants come forward. And we're going to be incredibly flexible to be able to make deals out there. I would say kind of one point to that flexible to make deals is we have heard strongly from your staff and from this community that you favor manufacturing. We of course favor manufacturing as well. One, the MOU said that we're incented for it with that lower tax abatement number in it, but also Mike said it, but it's very true that given the take or pay contract we have on these utility components, we really need to have manufacturing come into this site. If not, we're going to be footing the bill for all of those improvements out there. And those manufacturing deals, also we have an economic incentive that they end up usually paying more. So there's probably 3 or 4 different reasons that we are looking at manufacturing, not just because we know that it's important to this community. That's sort of reason one, but all of those others push into it as well. But we like having the flexibility, as given this is all a blank canvas, and Sarah's out there working all the time on it, that we want to be able to strike when deals come to get this started, because there's nothing more important than just getting started and putting this on the map in the region and in the nation. So a little bit last is just the schedule. This was within the packet and in the MOU. This is what we had talked with staff about, and we're already starting to execute on the first components of it, as this council knows. We got the site annexed in. We've submitted in last week during the Thanksgiving weekend our rezoning application. We're here tonight on the MOU. We can move forward with a planning commission hearing. We can then come forward to the council in early January for rezoning. We then would look and target at early February to be back in front of you, a very quick turn on doing development agreements, having the IRB resolution of intents, and moving forward on the benefit districts for Edgerton Road out there. And then we can go close and get started on doing this work. So that's the target of where we're setting out, but it's to show that we're not letting the grass grow. We're moving on this really fast if this council takes action tonight on this MOU. With that, I think we would, between Hunter, myself, and anyone else on the team, we'd stand for any questions the council would have, and would urge your approval of this MOU. We really know that this city's been working for years or decades on this site, and we want to work on this for years as well with you all.
Okay, thank you. Questions for staff or the applicant? Lori, anything?
I don't really have a question, but kind of a comment to kind of re-emphasize some of the things that were in my mind, but Hunter and Corb both mentioned, is that we've had a lot of opportunity, and Sarah will back me on this, economic opportunities that have come along in the last 10, 15 years. And not having a property that is ready to go, I think, makes a lot of difference. And so having somebody come and work with us to actually put that there, and now we are on the map for it's going to get done. It's not just, well, maybe someday we'll get something out there. Now it's really going to happen when you have a developer who's willing to do this. We tried to work really hard, staff did, to make sure that this is not costing the city money. It's a total benefit for the city, and I think that's really important to remember. And I think that Flint has worked really well with staff on doing all of this, and I feel real good about it, but I still feel, it's really, really exciting knowing that something is actually going to be there. And, Sarah, I'm sure, is just tickled as can be, because, something is actually going to happen that we've been working on. So, my only, I guess, you found us over here in the very edge of Johnson County, and that land is there, and, other than, I guess, it's a nice big chunk of land, I'm not, I guess my only question is what really brings you to DeSoto, and what's the best thing that you've found working with us here in DeSoto?
Well, I grew up in Baldwin City in Lawrence, so I drove by it 1,000 times. No, the size, the flexibility on the site, it isn't wildly constrained with wetlands and streams and other impediments. The 2 access points to a major arterial point. But probably as much or more than any of that is the community for which it's in. When you annex this property, we find that these users, and I've worked with several during this process, one that we didn't land that I know the state was very hopeful to because of the timing of the project. They were interested in this site because there's very low crime. You have a very safe community. You have a community that has strong schools, and you have a very viable labor force, which will be attracted to this project. So you know, the occupancy cost for these users for what they spend on rent is probably 6 to 10%. The vast majority of their costs are transportation and employees. And if they can have a high quality labor force that they know will be attracted if they occupy a space, that's what's win the deals. And that's why we're long on DeSoto, and that's not why we're not spending our time in other competitive communities in the Kansas City metro.
Thank you. I think that's all I have.
Okay. Rob, anything?
In the other logistics park projects, what's the typical breakdown of clients, logistic, warehouse distribution versus manufacturing? What have you seen in your other projects?
It really depends on the metro. I can tell you, you know, we have a project, two projects outside of the Port of Norfolk. Those are more heavily logistics, warehousing type of projects, just given where it is in the transportation network. You know, our projects in Detroit, those will both in some form or fashion be manufacturing, given the resurgence of electric vehicles and all the components that are going back into them. I would expect, based on the early indicators, and the early indicators being the users who have been interested in this site that we've either talked to or have had active proposals with, is that we'd probably be 60 to 65% manufacturing when it's all said and done, and the balance of it logistics, warehousing in some form or fashion. There's just so much demand for the logistics network as it's being built, you know, the rise of e-commerce. But one of the strongest benefits of this site are the availability and the abundance of utilities. You can't imagine how many sites throughout the metro where you might be able to fit a large building, they don't have sewer, or in some cases they don't have ample water or power. We can fulfill all of those needs with this site, and that's why I would probably skew, if I had a crystal ball, a higher amount of manufacturing on this site because of the availability of utilities.
So are these going to be leased or owned, purchased by them? Or
Both.
combination?
If we were to build a building speculatively, we would lease it. Of course, if a user came along and needed to acquire that, we're flexible. A lot of our competitors are building buildings and, you know, expecting to hold them for 7 to 10 years and cash flow and won't sell to users. There are several in this market just like that. We're flexible. If somebody comes along and needs to own the real estate, we can sell them land that's improved. We can build them a building for them to occupy it and purchase it at the end, or they can lease it from us. So I feel like we've got all of the cards in our hand when it comes to being able to meet users' needs on this site. Before that thought, I would say that many of these manufacturers have the tendency to want to own, and more of the logistics types users have the tendency to want to lease. That's our finding, and we can accommodate both.
Since I don't have some more questions, but that's all I have for them for now.
Kevin Ritter?
Well, he's answered several of them. I strongly like the fact that you stated 60 to 65% manufacturing versus the greater part of it being logistics. So I'm being flexible to that because there's greater good for the community.
Absolutely. We understand that as well.
So, yeah, I like that piece, and then as far as you said you plan to have one building up in a year. Is that what you
Yeah, the plan is to, when fully approved, we want to start site work construction in the spring. So that enables us to spend the next 6 or 7 months. It's a huge site, getting it graded properly, planning for the on-site utilities, and we have a schedule that shows when the city's doing its infrastructure work, bringing the sewer to the site, that we can effectively deliver graded pads right when those utilities meet the site. Our gut tells us during that time frame, users are going to show up when they see activity on the site, when they see that the stage is set. So I would expect that we would likely have some sort of activity, whether it be a build-to-suit or a user who wants to occupy a building that we sell land to. If not, as a further commitment to this project, to get activity going, we would agree to build a building greater than 500,000 square feet in order to attract tenants. Many of them, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, they come into town. It may be a multi-market search, not only within the metro, but also with other competing communities, Denver, Dallas, Indianapolis, Columbus, you name it. They'll be evaluating all these opportunities, and they might say, we need this space in 2 months. And those are the buildings that we're looking for. And that can be both manufacturing or logistics types of uses. So our business model is we will put up a building at least of that size if we haven't garnered any other activity, to our point. Or we might do that in addition to the activity that we garnered to that point.
Yeah.
Danny?
The only thing I'm in kind of leaning toward the manufacturing for the betterment of the city. And with that, you know, with the numbers that you come up with, 85% on if it's a manufacturing type deal, and then you had 83% if it was a warehouse type project or something like that. Is that correct?
I believe that is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, you know, I would like to see a number change. With the 10-year, that's fine. But with leaning toward the manufacturing, this would be better and more money for the city. And if we backed up to maybe 60% on the other side of the logistics part, warehousing, because, you know, we're not gaining anything on the water or anything with that because of the way that's done. And, of course, electricity minimum on a warehousing, and the amount of employees on warehousing is not as big as manufacturing. So that's where I'm sitting on the fence with a little bit of only 2% or on the numbers on between the difference between the two. I'd like to see that change, but that's where I am right now. So I'd like to hear some more opinions on that before I would okay a project.
I guess I'll just throw a few comments out. I think the key thing is we really don't, the market's going to dictate what comes. Having pad-ready sites is going to put us in a much more competitive situation when those manufacturing opportunities come along. If we don't have it pad-ready, we're where we've been for the last 15 years, which is responding with a green, and we may be in a worse spot would that property happen to the current owner pass and it goes to another owner, but we lose when we're presenting a site that may be ready in 2 years on an economic development pursuit for that great manufacturer. We're a lot lower on that list than a location that has a site that is ready to build on, right? So I think that's for me, that's one of the key things is that we have to come up with a way to get the property in a pad-ready condition so that if we really want to attract the best manufacturing opportunity we can, we have to have the best product that we can when we're going after the economic, when we're responding to these requests. That means having something that's ready to go vertical as soon as someone selects the site rather than waiting, you know, the 1.5 or 2 years for everything to happen. So that's key. The other thing is the infrastructure, the costs to develop the site, you know, the roads, the things that we need to have happen out there are roughly the same, whether that's logistics or it's manufacturing or whatever it might be. We need improvements to the streets, we need improvements to the water and sewer. So those things have to happen, and those are investments that need to go in that property that need to be paid for in some fashion. So I think the mechanism that was presented in here was to incentivize through the pilot at the end, rather than some steep difference between the incentive for you know, logistics versus manufacturing on the total incentive percentage. And those are just my thoughts and observations. I mean, I think it's key that no matter what we do, we're not going to get where we want to be if we don't have a pad-ready site. I think we've been through that enough times to know that we'll get close, and maybe we'll hit it, but most likely that property will pass on and be divided up, or you know, in some other use before that actually comes to pass. And this, I think, puts us in the best position to attract that home run user.
Mayor, thank you for that, and council member, understand the point for sure. And I tried to hit on it a little bit in my presentation, but to kind of drive home some of the points the mayor's making. Beyond the land purchase and beyond all the grading, which sets the table for this, as you all know, we also have to bring all those utilities to this site. And that's a pretty expensive proposition. Mike went through that, but it's, you know, it's 2.3 million and another 3 million, it's $5 million between water and sewer out there. If we only bring distribution users that, as you said, don't use a lot of those services, we have to pay for all of that, right? We just write checks to the city. Again, we don't want you all to take that risk. So the mechanism we came up in working with staff is we're gonna have to pay for that. That's likely a cost we can't just pass on to that tenant, right? So it's gonna be these guys and their capital partner that's gonna have to write that check. In essence, Councilman, what I would say from that is you've built in that incentive already. That deduct that you want, where you're not getting that effective tax abatement up at that 85%, you've put it in there practically already through those utility payments, because those utility payments end up coming and we have to pay those. So there is already, beyond that 2% incentive part, there is a really very real penalty in this for sort of doing just pure distribution through the whole entire component of it. So I think we tried to take that concern in everything we were doing and work it into this to be there. But I think the mayor's point's right, is that the first and most important thing is someone's got to go buy this, someone's got to go do all of this infrastructure and site work to get it ready and set the table. And you've got the folks that are ready right now, right here today with the checkbook that can go and do it and not fund it on debt and not be worried about sort of can they finance it. It's ready to go.
You know, Mayor, I had some of the same questions that Danny just spoke about, but when you presented the presentation, I thought you did a real good job about speaking to those things, and you as well. So thank you. And wanting to bring that big project and working with Sarah and the other staff. So, you know, at first I thought it needed to be bigger as well, but as the presentation presented, what we need here is we need a place to people to come.
The one thing I also meant to mention was the idea that we're going to get out of the ground one way or another a 500,000 square foot. I don't know, in conversations with Sarah, at least half of the requests that she gets for economic development pursuits are for buildings that are already built. And we just don't have that here, and that is another product then that we will have to attract those opportunities that we just have to let pass now because we don't have that. And that was just something I forgot to mention when I was rambling on earlier.
I think you need to.
Did I?
No, he did.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say, it's good to see things moving. The infrastructure is needed, pad ready is needed. I've typically had no problems with a lot of what I've seen in the MOU, although with our due diligence that was done by Burns, it very clearly did lean towards manufacturing as far as the due diligence in the report. And so, like Danny coming into it, I wanted to see, and I still would like to see, a greater disparity of incentive for manufacturing and less for warehouse distribution. Having listened to the presentation, I don't think it's as much of a decrease in the warehouse distribution as I would have started with. But I still think there's grounds to find more incentive for the manufacturing distribution over the warehousing. I'm not sure where that would end up being or what that would be. But I would still like to see the warehousing take a little bit less incentive, because it's at the city level that we have the ability to incentivize what industries and what we want to see, and everything's pointed to manufacturing for the wages, for the franchise fees for the usage. Couple questions I did have. One would be directed to Patrick. In a lot of the other pilot agreements, the abatements are based upon above average wages. Is there anything that, because like with engineered air and some of the others, there's been, the abatements are, there's a lower abatement if it's average wages versus above average. Is there anything that's discussed or like that with this agreement? Or
Yeah,
any
we
standards in that?
haven't gotten to that level, but I would just ask Jeff and Kevin. My understanding would be that we would still need to, any abatement, we would still need to have a public hearing and do a pilot agreement. So those would be details. Obviously good example would be if it's a production facility, then, it would be similar to engineered air or rarig that, that likely would be a criteria, but if it's warehouse, that doesn't really fit. So it would kind of depend on the specific user that's coming to the city. So that'd be my comment on it.
So if it was warehouse distribution, the wage issue would really not come into play as long, but manufacturing it would?
That'd be my thought on that is I guess we could, but we've dealt with, for example, the goods or the warehouse that we approved, and talking to Jeff and Kevin, the thought was that, when it comes to warehousing, really those wage rates just don't fit, and most cities don't have clawbacks on that for warehouse space. But for production facilities, that definitely is something that we would consider.
Which kind of would speak to one of my concerns about incentivizing manufacturing over warehousing.
What I'd like to offer is, so we spent obviously a great deal of time and a number of months with staff working through the MOU, as you see before it this evening. We feel the level of abatement for warehousing is where we see is the minimum for us to be competitive in the metro. I can tell you we're already at a disadvantage to Missouri. They have the Port Authority. They can offer a 20-year, 100% tax abatement to incentivize users. So our strength at this site will be the labor, the transportation network, and the employee pool in order to go compete with that. In more interior metros or interior communities to the metro, Lenexa, Olathe, I think you typically see that 50% abatement for a similar use. We feel like we probably need to be more competitive as we're farther out in the ring, so to speak. So to be candid with you, I think if you were to further incent manufacturing, we'd probably ask that you wouldn't be in compliance with your incentive policy and go above that 85% to 90 or 95%, not drop the warehousing below the 83, which is already in compliance with your incentive policy.
Any other comments, questions? So I think the actions, we can approve this if we're so inclined. I guess we could talk about it more at another meeting if we thought that would do, but Lori, were you going to say something?
Well, I guess, yeah, I mean, I don't really want to make a motion on approving something if there's still a lot of concern in a couple of council members' minds as far as this, what percentage of tax abatement they're receiving on it. I don't know that our policy breaks it out as far as a different abatement, whether it's a warehouse or a manufacturing.
I don't think we
I
know that
don't
specific.
know that it really, I feel that even if that ended up all being warehouse out there, I'm not sure that that is a total disadvantage. Under this agreement, going to be able to pay for what it took to build it and put out there. The benefits to the city for the cost of those buildings and the taxes we'll receive at some point are still going to be much more than what we have. So I guess my question really, where are the heavy concerns about one or the other? I get that we want manufacturing, we want jobs, we want some of those things that you're talking about. They also bring their own challenges also. So, there's, two sides of everything. So I guess maybe Rob or Danny, if the reason for thinking behind that needing to have it a different one, what's the big pull on that, just to help me understand? I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just kind of trying to figure the understanding of what
The
makes.
diligence report outlined a lot of the benefits of having the manufacturing over the warehousing as far as long-term benefits to the city, which is why it did not include warehousing in its recommendations. So that's a lot of where I land on that.
So, I guess my question to you then is this, what kind of comfort level are we at here tonight? Because I don't, is this something, how strongly do you feel about it, I guess is my, and where do we go from here?
Right.
Well, I know when I came in tonight, I was thinking of there is a prime piece of property that is probably one of the best in the state of Kansas. having the two accesses and things of that nature, but like I said, as I went through, I know that you mentioned the Bunton Act report, and so that means that you've obviously read it and care about it, and you mentioned 65% manufacturing, so I thought that was a plus, but I just want to see the best thing that we can bring to that area to drive the best revenue for our citizens, because it's a prime piece of property.
If I can just, Hunter, just prior to you making it, I would just mention too, as I said, you know, the tax abatement would come back before you, and yes, what you're considering is, you know, essentially the deals, but it's not like, in my mind, this isn't the last, you know, say you'll have in what the you know, that there would be a public hearing. Jeff would prepare a cost benefit analysis, you know, you'd be able to see, you know, that analysis. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that, yeah, this is not, there'll be lots more proceedings in front of you as to what the use would be of those buildings out there.
You know, really at the end of the day, it's going to be a mix of both. We just don't know what that mix is, and we won't ever know until we have a site that's suitable for actual development, which is what's on the critical path here. I don't think the project would be, with 360 acres, it wouldn't be a success in my standpoint if it were all manufacturing. That's too much. Those users will start to compete for labor and not locate around. So it needs to be a mix. It needs to be a balance. It needs to be a successful business park that we wish to create here. What we're asking for is the tools that enable us to give us the highest probability of success in landing both tenants, in order to get buildings built as quickly as we can, in order to get them on the tax rolls, producing jobs, and adding value back to the community. We feel that the MOU as presented enables us to do that.
And one other just point of the only thing that I don't think we mentioned at any point in this is the buildings that end up getting built, those have 30, 40, 50, 60-year lives to them and time periods, right? And just because for the first couple of years something is distribution doesn't mean that that's what the life of that building is going to be, right? This park is going to be built on this great real estate, and it's going to continue to evolve. If we do it right and put up the right Class A buildings, those are going to continue to have benefits to them much past that abatement period. And so it will continue to change and evolve all throughout the life of this project, and the life of that park, and the life of the taxes and the jobs and employment that it puts into the community. So I think that's another component, is you're incenting for that very early period, but lots of things are going to happen in the life of that building as it moves forward, and all of those benefits are going to accrue to the city.
So Patrick, even though the percentages are broken out in the MOU, that's not a guarantee?
Well, you still have to have a public hearing by statute and a cost benefit analysis. So no, it is not binding on you. This is a resolution of intent that, you know, the city is giving its indication of, you know, now what you would be comfortable with, but each tax abatement would have to be considered, you know, as to that specific use and with the public hearing. So
and I completely agree with that 100%. I do not disagree with Patrick in any form or fashion. That is absolutely true. There is nothing binding in this document that we're doing between us. And there will be many more hearings that we will all do between us. We will end up having zoning, we will end up having resolutions of intent and otherwise. But we're spending money every day on this site, and then we're gonna spend a lot of money on this, like big dollars, 8-figure kind of dollars that are gonna be spent. We're happy to keep coming back and talking about it, but we view it as a benefit of a bargain with you, not in a legal standpoint, but as a moral commitment and deal between Flint and the city of DeSoto. That's why we went through this MOU, is to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Mike, anything you can add to?
Yeah, not really,
Okay.
other than what's already been said. You know, I think there's some good points about the developer's motivation to get production type uses over warehouse distribution, the biggest one being those utility agreements. You know, if they don't have users of water and sewer out there, they're gonna be footing those bills. And I would remind that, when we initiated this process through the Chamber of Commerce, with Mr. Gabriel and executing those land purchase options, the fear at the beginning was that Mr. Gabriel might not live to see, to see this property develop, and that his heirs might have different ideas about what's best for that property, that might not align with ours. And so, primary motivating factor for those purchase agreements options was to ensure that something like that didn't happen, that, you know, these pursuits that we've been having over the last 10 years would culminate in nothing, and that we'd have a prime piece of real estate with 2 interchanges that essentially goes to waste. And then the last thing is that, you know, even at the lower incentive rate, it is consistent with our economic incentive policy. It is 85%. And we contemplated light industrial uses that do include warehouse distribution, e-commerce type uses. I don't think they would be a detriment to the city in terms of future revenues, future obligations. So that's what I would say. You know, it's still, from a staff perspective, you know, from my perspective, I think this MOU is a good basis for understanding of the developments that will follow. And I think it's consistent with our economic incentive policies, consistent with our strategic plan, consistent with our comprehensive plan, and still recommend approval in its current form.
I did want to comment, Mike, too. Mike had mentioned that we'd been negotiating this for months, and that's true in a sense at the staff level and, you know, the committee. And I understand, you know, this literally is the first time that we're presenting this to the council as a whole. But I think it's worth noting that this, I mean, it was a tough negotiation. I mean, there were times that we really, and so I know at the staff level, we feel like we pushed the best deal that we were comfortable keeping the developer at the table. So I don't feel like, definitely did not feel that we were pushed around at all on this. I mean, you know, with Jeff and Kevin, Mike, myself, we really felt like we had a strong team and really tried to get on paper the best deal for the city. So, like Mike, I'm comfortable saying that this was the very best we could, negotiate for your consideration. But I understand, you know, there are still maybe questions and concerns, but at least from staff's perspective, we feel like we really did the best we could.
Certainly.
One, like you said, this is the first time we've seen it, so I don't want you to be discouraged in any way. And secondly, as you build this thing out and it finishes, is there, in the terms, is there, I guess, how do you plan to still be involved with the EDC and being a member at the highest rate and things of that nature, as we've asked other people that
Yes, we committed to a multi-year partnership with the EDC, that we're front-loading the cost of saying it Flint is a vested interest of the project. I have no doubt that this will be somewhere between a 2 and a 5 year project for us. So we're going to be in the community for a long time. It's going to be a lot of hard work. It's an incredibly, while it is a great site, it's an incredibly competitive market, not only within the metro, but of other competing metros throughout the region. So you're choosing a partner as much as anything here. And I think you need to choose one who has a great team, a great track record, who is going to work with your staff and the EDC hand in hand to go land these users. We want to get the table set in order for us to do that.
That's what I wanted to do. And I'd asked other folks that have gotten incentives in the past the same question, so I just wanted.
Mike, the abatements, the 10-year abatement, is that when each building's finished, or is it when, because it's per square foot?
Yeah,
So is it like 10 years from building 1 being completed, 10 years starting when building 2, 3, so it's
Correct.
10 years from the completion of each building?
That's right. Would be in phases.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to do something. So if we think we're comfortable to make a motion to approve it as it is, with the understanding we're going to see this a number of times more, but this lays the groundwork for our agreement with Flint. We can do that. If you think more time is needed, I guess we could table or take another till the next meeting in December. There's nothing that says that we can't do that. If you think that would help, or
Where I'm personally at now, coming into it, I was a no. Hearing from Flint has assuaged a lot of the fears, or concerns, I should say, not fears. I still would like to see a greater disparity between warehouse, not necessarily a substantial one, but at least more. If the abatements are something that can still be addressed in the future, and this doesn't commit us or lock us in directly to it, then I would probably be willing to say okay to the MOU, knowing that we'd have still some at least minor discrepancies to work through on the abatement levels.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, I feel you gave a great presentation. And,
I mean, as long as that's clear, I think we can put the motion forward.
okay. I think it just from what I've heard and from what I was part of the negotiation, I don't think there's a lot of room or any room to drop that bottom one. I mean, the 80, I mean, Patrick said it was a long, hard. So if we're thinking that we're gonna go from the 83 to 80, if that's our expectation, I don't believe that that's really gonna happen. You know, I mean, if we're committed and think the manufacturing is critical and important to us, I think that we need to be willing to consider an 83 to 88 disparity versus an 83 to 85. But that, I don't think that, having been part of this thing for 6 months, I don't think that we're gonna get the bottom pushed down any further on the incentive level. So I just want you guys to understand that when you're thinking, going forward, that there's gonna be a lot of wiggle or some wiggle in those incentive levels.
Well, and I mean, what I've stated is a disparity between the two. So I mean, if that means we take 1 or 2% from one and move up 3 or 4% on the other, just a greater disparity between the two to where the manufacturing distribution is incentivized more.
This one.
Yeah, I think what Rick is saying though, again, you know, unfortunately, we all can't be involved in the planning of this up until this point. But well, myself, I guess, because Kevin's not been involved in it, and the financial committee of the mayor and Mike and Patrick and the council, we have worked on this. It was not here, this is what we want, and that's it. Mike has worked hard with them. They've gone back and forth. This has been thought about and worked on hard. And so I agree with Rick that, our bottom line there on the 83% is probably going to be there. I think we're doing pretty good with that. Yeah, we can give more incentive for the other, but as long as, you guys, we do realize that going down a lot lower is probably not going to happen but with this deal. And if that's something that, you're willing to give it up for, then so be it. But I'm not. I think that I'm excited for either way that's coming out there. Obviously, we've heard that manufacturing is going to be what they're going to want, because otherwise it's going to just not work. But, there's not going to be a lot of dropping down on what we're given on that one, and there should not have to be, because our incentive policy states an 85%. So if we want to give more to the manufacturing and we want to up that'll be an easy fix. It's not going to be an easy fix going the other way.
I'd be willing to go up on the high side.
Okay. So, and we don't have to do that tonight, but, I would like to, make sure that, as the mayor stated, that we don't.
I just wanted to make everybody aware that that's where I thought we were standing. If we're ready to make a motion, I would be happy to listen to it. If somebody wanted to move that.
I'll make a motion. We approve the memorandum of understanding between the City of DeSoto and Flint Acquisitions LLC as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Lane.
No.
Daniels.
Yes.
Hanamichael. Ritter.
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-1.
Okay, thank you, everybody. It was a good discussion, a lot of hard work. Thank you, Hunter and Flint, Corb, and I always forget your name.
Devin.
Devin.
Sorry.
We don't let him speak. It's all right.
No.
He's the brains of the operation.
Yeah, just
Hunter, I hope you just stay steadfast with the way you present yourself and the things you stated tonight. So, that's it. Thank you.
Is he awake back there?
Barely.
Almost fell asleep.
Yeah. All right, we will move on now. Let Councilman Hanamichael get, you need your technology up, or can I move on to the?
Go ahead.
Item B, consider resolution 1063, intent to issue $20 million in industrial revenue bonds for Intervet.
Yes, council, I provided a memo. You've done this several previous times. This is a little different than a typical IRB tax abatement. Might allow Kevin and Jeff to address it, but essentially, we had a site meeting at Intervet. I was there, Mr. Beasy was there, Ron was there. There were several members of the county, and I think, Rudy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that prompted, at least in some respect, an understanding that some of the expenditures Intervet wanted to seek abatement and IRBs on, and so and it needed to be done before the end of the year. So thanks to Kevin and Jeff and staff, we were able to pull things together to present this to you. originally the amount of expenditures was 30 million. That was adjusted downward to 20 million. So actions tonight would be your indication by passage of the resolution that you will issue the IRBs at a level of 75% tax abatement, and then the ordinance that will come later authorizes the issuance of the 20 million in industrial revenue bonds. And that, by doing that, you're approving the pilot, which sets the abatement level at 75%, as well as other items that we've done in the past in the pilot. So with that, I'll stand for questions and allow Kevin or Jeff to add anything that I have not covered.
All right, I will entertain questions from council. I'll just have one. I mean, typically we would do this at the start of the project, right? I mean, before the money's spent. So I guess my question would be to Intervet and to Rudy and Ron, isn't there a way that you could come to us at the start of the year or like the start of your project and say, here's what we intend to do and here's what we need, rather than coming at the end? I know you may not know exactly how you're gonna do everything throughout the year and how the project would shake out, but it would seem like that it would follow the process that we're most familiar with if it was tackled in that manner. Is that a fair question?
I'll take this. I'm Rudy Beasy. I'm with Denton, represent Intervet, and thank you for hearing from us this evening. Mayor, council members, it is particularly difficult to forecast the amount of spend that will occur, as you can see by the adjustment we even made at the last minute, literally, in the amounts for not only constructing but equipping facilities that are going to be the subject of these bonds. Part of the challenge there has to do with COVID, frankly, for the last 2 years, and what we've been able to complete, what we've been able to schedule, and what we've been able to engage contractors to perform out at the site. Part of it has to do, though, also with just getting the work completed in a timely manner at the end of the year so that we can include it within the bond series. We've been before you almost every year, basically, that I can remember, right? Which is a good thing. We're at that other phase from the last applicant that you heard from. We've prepared the site. We continue to make the site ready for new investment. And our perception on this is that we can come to the city as a partner and work with you in order to achieve tax abatement on the parcels that are being improved. So apologies for always doing this seemingly in November or October, this year December, but it is just partly a function of how we spend and how we allocate the resources to spend in a particular year, and to size the bond with what we've actually experienced for the year. By statute, case law, we can go through it, and I can go through it with Patrick if we need to. It's not unusual in my practice for us to be before City Council quite late in the year because of some of these challenges. I know that there are others that come before you with a single parcel, or maybe a parcel like we just saw with the last applicant, where they propose to do something in the future and they have frankly no clue as to what they really are going to come before you to try and build with a particular series of bonds. And I do work for those developers too. This one's a little more complicated because there are different buildings that are involved, some of which are abated. And it involves our production and all the supporting facilities. And so that's why you see us come to you a little bit later in the year. We started this process, frankly, I think in, I'm going to say May or June. And then we had a delay with COVID and site meetings that Patrick referred to. Those were unavoidable, frankly, just because of the Delta variant spread. And so that hampered all of us in being before you today. We needed to get the site meeting out of the way in order to better understand what would be abated, what would be considered equipping of the facility versus improvements, and that's had some effect also on the amount that we're asking for. So I'll stand for any questions, and I know Ron is prepared to do that too. But we truly look to the city as a partner and look forward to continuing to make this site basically investment bank.
Ron Williams, Merck Animal Health. Rick, I'd like to address your question directly, is why don't we come before you? And we have. In 2017, we requested $50 million. I believe it was $50 million. And then we had an agreement for an additional $125 million in proposed industrial revenue bonds for investment in the animal and Merck Animal Health site. So we came to go before you several years ago, and it's on the basis of these industrial revenue bonds. In the 125, there was no promise by the city, but it had a 10-year sunset, and there was this agreement with the city that we were going forward and doing these. So I don't feel like we're coming in at the last minute, and now we're asking for these. We set this up several years ago, and now we're proceeding forward and through these type of bonds. Really, the 20 million, the 3 projects we're on, we added a new building G, a new utilities building to support our manufacturing for better, higher efficiency and more steam for plant steam, chilled water, processed chilled water. We replaced our old farmhouse. It used to be our office building. We had the foundation collapsed and became no longer usable, so we replaced it with an office building. We put in new locker rooms. That was not a planned project. And we've also put it in a new utility building due to the condition of one of our other buildings. The farm is an old Bear facility that was started back in the 70s, and a lot of it does not meet current standards. So a lot of this is replacement for us. So I don't feel like we're just coming to the last minute and asking for this. And Merck has continued with this basis of these IRBs to go forward and invest in the DeSoto site.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't infer that it's last minute. Now, I do recognize or acknowledge the agreement. We had an understanding or an agreement, that you were going to do a building program, and that was going to be an incentive was going to be available for that building program. I was just curious. I don't know or understand how you operate your business, but I'm thinking, all right, I'm starting this building program. I'm going to do this building this year. And it's going to cost, I think it's going to cost this much. So before you, that was my thought, is like, you have a plan, come say, all right, this is what we're planning to do this year. And then we would do our cost benefit analysis, have everything done. Now it may change at the end of the year. Obviously it does for you guys, But.
I'll give you an example of a change is that we've had heavy truck traffic on 87th Street. And Mike and I have discussed this, has caused deterioration of the road. And Mike called me up and says, Ron, we talked about this, what are you going to do to fix it? And Merck came to Mike and said, Mike, we'll do a bond or charge against Merck. We'll pay that via taxes. Merck's going to pay for the upgrade of the road, replacement of the culvert. That wasn't in my budget or on my radar screen for $750,000 6 months ago. So that's how the collapse of the building and our admin building for the farm, that wasn't on our radar screen 2 years ago. So some of these things we try to be very dynamic and we adjust to what we need. I have another project that's going on, that will be coming up next year, where we're increasing our biosecurity because of the changes in regulations. It's not that anything's hazardous or dangerous now, but it's because of changes in regulations. So those things come up and we have to move and adjust as those go forward.
Okay. Certainly.
Just wanted to note, and I know Rudy, we've talked, I guess the thing we constantly struggle with is our law and our code has, for all tax abatements, we have a but-for criteria. And that's why we constantly, just parity with other applicants. The but-for criteria is that the applicant has to show that without the abatement, they can't do the project. And that this timing thing sort of, comes across as you're doing the project regardless of a tax abatement. You don't really need the tax abatement. And that's different. And I understand you guys are maybe in a different business than others, but for other applicants, we, just like the one before us, we get their pro forma, we dig into, is this really needed to make this project a go? And so with the type of stuff you're doing is sort of kind of backwards in a way, in that when we learn of it, it's already complete or well underway, so it kind of defeats this but-for criteria. And so that's kind of the constant issue that Mike and I have struggled with over the years, when you know, when it comes to us, there's already been a building permit pulled, that, you know, a building's already, you know, substantially complete, then it's sort of hard to make the case to the council that but-for criteria has been satisfied. So that's the constant thing that we struggle with.
Did we do that when we did I know it wasn't like a formal, but when we did the 120, the 50, and then it was another 75, right? Did we do the cost benefit analysis and I mean, was that
Not for the 125. We couldn't because the projects were so non-specific, and so Jeff White does, and no, for the 125, it was sort of a handshake that, yes, we understand you're gonna be doing projects, and I think at that point, we were in the running for a massive project, or I can't, maybe Mike remembers that at least at that point, there was talk that perhaps Merck would make this a much bigger site, and that you guys needed that sort of handshake on the 125 to go to the people, you know, the higher ups, to sort of sell that, look, DeSoto is a good partner, and you know, if you decide to select DeSoto, they're indicating that you know, they'll be a willing partner. And as far as I know, that opportunity passed. And I understand you guys, we still, you know, because we talked about it, that you've indicated that, well, we still have to keep, you know, improving the site, because there could come a day when an opportunity like that comes, but no, as to the 125, there was no cost benefit analysis.
Well, and to Patrick's point, though, I think one of the pieces that's really important for both of us to understand, and it gets back to the partnership that we're talking about. These projects take a long lead time in order to bring to a site, whether it's ours or somewhere else. When Ron goes and the leadership of the site, the plant site, go back to Merck to advocate for this site, it's really important to be able, just like with the last applicant, to be able to demonstrate that there's a level of support from the city, both in terms of property tax abatement and just community way of life, the whole part of it that we all enjoy, right? But because that's so important, because they form their figures around what it's going to cost literally to be here versus Worthington or Millsboro or other places that we've talked about, you know, and now there are more, right? It's really important to be out in front with something like that resolution of intent that you all passed at the $125 million level. It may be too soon to talk about another one, right? Especially with this conversation. But the really important piece is to be able to go internally to Merck and say, the site's ready to go, just like the pad-ready site and the last applicant could. And we're in a position to move forward because we've already had these conversations, more difficult conversations with the city. And the city and their council are supporting. And that's the part that hopefully we can continue to telegraph back to Merck in terms of these deals. But it's also partly why you see these later in the year as opposed to at the beginning of the year. Because as we advocate for these projects, they come through, we go build them, and then we get a better understanding about halfway through the year as to what we think is going to cost through the end of the year. And if you think of it in those terms, it kind of starts to make sense. We're up later this year, in part because of the site meeting that Mike shared. That wasn't fun for anybody, but it just took as long as it took. It did. But I think our application was in a week or two after that.
Well, you know, we recognize Merck as a great partner in our community and a great asset to our community. Please don't take the wrong impression from my questions that I would. I'm just trying to understand the process and why it's reverse in my mind to what we have typically done on other projects. Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, so I had spoke with the mayor about this a little bit earlier, and we were talking about just what we were talking now. And I understand too that, you know, we do feel good about working our relationship with you, and I'm not at all against the tax abatements. I think what always throws me is that I don't know what's going on out there when I know about all the other economic development that's happening. So I don't know, and you say, okay, we built building C, and and did that. So, my question earlier today is, okay, are they building a lot of new buildings? Are we just putting new equipment in old buildings and kind of, okay, that's off the tax abatement, and now we're adding something new on? So I guess that's kind of, my concern isn't really a concern, but my comments are really based on the fact that we don't really know, I don't feel I really know what the money is going to, what's growing out there. So I think that maybe it would maybe make me feel better if sometime, whatever you can do, just like explaining to us from day, 10 years ago or 5 years ago until today, the growth that you have had out there, the value of the place in terms of difference. I mean, that kind of thing is what, because like we keep doing this every year, but I don't know that I ever get an idea of exactly what it was worth 5 years ago and what that, what financially, where we're at now on it. I know, if we're adding new equipment, okay, is it a new equipment? Are we replacing old equipment? Are we, is one tax abatement going away and now something new is coming, just replacing it? Is it brand new buildings that, will we at the end ever see this, the economic, the full amount out of it? The abatement actually going away on stuff, or is it just kind of recycling? That's, I guess, kind of my question. It's not like I'm against any of this. It's just like, I always feel like I don't know what we're really approving, what that money is going for. Does that make sense, kind of, in a way?
Yeah, and we don't publicize a lot of that, and we try to stay quiet. I will tell you that in the last 7 years, we've more than tripled the output, manufacturing output out of the DeSoto plant. We sell over 60% of the swine vaccines in all of North and South America. We sell over 50% of the cattle vaccines in all of North America. When the COVID-19 hit, we had 3 other animal health suppliers that went out of stock on a primary cattle vaccine. We emptied 6 months of safety stock in 3 days. And we had the manufacturing capacity to start coming back to be able to pick that up. So yes, we're buying new equipment. Yes, the plant is 20 years old and we're replacing equipment. A fermenter that gets thermal cycled 5-10 times a week, it wears out. And those are $4 or $5 million pieces of equipment. So the main plant that the original revenue bonds were for in 2000, a lot of that equipment that's installed now is being replaced. We installed the new utilities building last year. That was to replace boilers that were over 20 years old. That was to restore, replace equipment and utilities for that type of thing. So yes to that question is we have over tripled our capacity coming out of that plant, and we are a very, very important piece of the food supply chain in North and South America for vaccines, and that continues to grow. Merck is a corporation. I'm sure we did our part for trying to get COVID vaccines. Ours didn't work out. Merck manufacturing in Pennsylvania manufactures over half the J&J COVID vaccine that's going out into the market today because we have the manufacturing facilities available. So part of this is planning for what we have. The other part is planning for the future, what we're coming for products. Animal health is unlike human health, when a new product comes down the line and it takes 3, 4, 5 years to get to market. Animal health, a lot of times, once it's developed and we prove efficacy, we need to be on the market within 6 to 12 months. And I can't build a manufacturing facility that fast. So a lot of this is building out to what we see and we think might come. About half of it doesn't come. That's just the reality of the business for it.
Yeah.
So I understand. I probably can't completely explain. I was more than happy to give you guys tours, walk you through the plant so you can better understand what it is we do.
Yeah, I think just the fact that, and I'm sure Mike probably knows what was going on out there, and maybe it's a communication between our inspecting department, because obviously somebody has to inspect some of this and plans are approved. So maybe just if what can be said, because I know there may be things that you don't want public, and I understand that, but if they're just a communication, maybe it's in-house with council, just knowing what's going on so that when this comes up in December, when next December comes, when you start something in January, February, March, then we kind of know what it is, so we know it's going to happen, just so that we know that something's going on and not, it's almost like, I don't know, it's like poof, it's there.
When the building permit application comes in for something at Merck, maybe we need
Maybe if we
that in
just
the
are
weekly
just
update so
told
that we-
about it, just so we know what's happening, so that when this happens, it's not like, oh, wow, all of a sudden, it's like, for me, it feels like it's a secret until bam, have to approve this. And I don't think it's meant to be that way, but that's why we're feeling and saying the things that we're saying. Why do you come afterwards when you know what's going on? But most everything else that's happening in town, we see it and we can be a part of it and we're, you know, but with you guys, it isn't that way and it's okay. It's just, you know, that's why it's always like, why we're saying this. Every year we say, well, why didn't you tell us this before? It's not that we're like, you know, we're willing to do it. It's just kind of always backwards for us. And that's why we're asking these questions.
I'd be more than happy to sit down with you early next year because we have some additional projects on the board starting next year.
Right.
And I will tell you that we don't, because 75% of the animal health companies in the entire world are located within 150 miles of Kansas City. I put building numbers on my project plans. I don't tell what the product is or anything else like that because I don't want my competitors to know.
And that's understandable. That's
And
understandable.
it's not unusual.
I guess for me, it was just a matter of knowing that what's going on out there is growing and expanding and adding additional benefit for the city in the long run, not just kind of replacing and keeping up and that type. I know there's some of that going on, but.
And there is building that's rolling off the tax rolls back at the scene, like the scene, and are rolling onto the tax roll.
That's good.
But there are new buildings that are being constructed and new buildings that are on the boards, and we'll try and do more accommodating.
Thank you.
So
That's all.
how would you propose we do that? I mean,
Well, really, just as, I mean, if I think maybe even just us, you know, giving just a rundown of something to Mike, and I think he can share it with us.
But we meet with Mike at least
Yeah.
a couple times a year.
Yeah.
We were here
Well-
3-4 months ago, 2 months ago, we're talking about the buildings I have going next year. I've talked to Mike about
Okay,
already.
then we'll get the information.
Not to Mike.
No, but we.
Well,
He's been very good about
What would be
confidentiality.
helpful for me
Yeah.
is a map of the whole property. Hey, 2000, you know, this was done, and just kind of the footprints of where you're working. You know, just a visual. For me, that visual would be helpful. I don't think I've.
But just a reminder that some of that's classified.
Well,
I
it-
want folks to know
See it.
No names,
it's
just
like a
years.
map, you know, you
Yeah.
don't want to stand out a map and say this is here.
Google Maps just updated about 6 months ago.
Well, that's what I was saying. I mean, it's really just a matter of an upper version, but anyway, we can,
All right.
But we do
I'm done.
appreciate the support. But appreciate the context.
And don't rethink that future investment in DeSoto at all. We love you here. So.
Yeah, and if you are fixing them stuff just to stay here, that's fine. Great.
all right.
Any other questions? So what's our action,
Thank you.
Patrick? Thank you.
Would you like a motion?
Motion to approve resolution 1063 as written.
Okay.
I'll make a motion. We approve Resolution 1063 as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? Roll call, please.
Lane,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Hanamichael.
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. So this is the
Same
sister
motion to-
ordinance, if you will.
Right, motion to approve ordinance 2522 as written.
I'll make a motion. We approve Ordinance 2522 as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? Roll call, please.
Lane,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Hanamichael.
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you, Rudy. We made you earn your money tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Item 5, executive session. We do not have any, I assume.
That's right.
Okay, so we will go on to advisory reports. City Administrator.
Yeah, just one thing, and I've kept the council updated on the water quality issue that we had over the Thanksgiving weekend. Now appears to be resolved, maybe if not for every single residence, but largely resolved. I sent out a memo was it yesterday, the day before?
Day before.
Kind of a post-op, of that whole event and the personnel action that we had to take. If you want to discuss that in more detail, we might need to go into executive session.
Yeah, I was wondering, Mike, good night, you sent him in to do a check. Is that correct? Besides the flushing, I know that.
Yeah, so the memo kind of outlined the sequence of events. As we started to get complaints on Tuesday before Thanksgiving, we did, at that time we were chasing kind of individual ones and flushing those areas and testing chlorine residuals and some other testing there at those locations. But then as that persisted on Wednesday, it was clear that it was a citywide issue. Yeah, the memo kind of explained that whole sequence of events, but throughout we were testing in the system for chlorine residuals to make sure that the water was safe, and that our suspicion that it was the mixing of the pHs, the different pH water, that caused the reaction that caused the smell. And so the whole time that was confirmed in what we were doing. So it really wasn't until Sunday after Thanksgiving that we did the citywide, the massive flushing effort really took place on Sunday. And so that by this week, by Monday, Tuesday, the issue was largely subsiding. And by previous, the actual event at the treatment plant, the higher pH water was really only a one-day sort of thing. It was on the Monday before Thanksgiving. It was really only that day. But that water, that was made that day was essentially pumped out on Tuesday, was in the distribution system Tuesday, Wednesday, possibly, by Thursday, Friday, lower pH water was pumped, so it could have been kind of a double sort of situation where it reacted again, but that's why the event lasted so long.
It was bad.
Okay,
It's back.
It was bad, I said.
Oh, it was back.
Yeah, it was.
If I can't drink the water, it's pretty bad.
but
it's good now.
Do we need to go into executive session to hear more about the memo?
Nope.
I don't, I'm comfortable.
It's clear.
I just want to make sure the council's ready, okay?
Okay, yeah.
Anything else, Mike?
No, I'll leave the events of this weekend for you to announce.
Okay. City attorney.
Nothing for me. Kevin, thanks for coming out. Appreciate your support.
City clerk.
The only thing I have is in your mailboxes, you have the personnel manual that was adopted about a month ago, and the ID cards. The ID cards were mostly Whitney, and the personnel manuals were me. So those are there for you, and we'll loop back around later on about more.
All right. Council comments. Danny, anything for the
Don't
group
have
tonight?
anything, Mayor, thank you.
All right, thank you. Kevin Ritter?
I only have one item. It deals with an increase of theft out on Waverly, south of 95th and Cherry Stokes. We've, the new project that's going on across the street lost a trailer with a significant amount of product on it. I actually witnessed that vehicle drive away, but I couldn't see anything significant for them. 2 days ago, the neighbor where the freezes live, they lost the trailer, and then today we lost the package off of our front door. So I just want to make everybody aware that some of that's going on.
Well, I will
I'm
share.
sure it's happening everywhere in the city, but it just seems to be increased out our area. And I talked about the dark areas, a couple meetings ago. Waverly's going to be very dark to drive on, and that's so when that vehicle left, I could see him coming out the corner because of the light that's at Waverly and at that project. But then as they traveled down the street, I couldn't. It didn't illuminate it 20 feet past my house. I couldn't see the truck. So, but I think that's going to be a continued problem. I don't know what time you can run after dark. But it seems like people's already driving off the road.
Light's a double-edged sword, especially in a rural area. You know, there are those that want it, and then there are those that hate the additional light pollution. So, I mean, so in transitioning areas, that's gonna be a challenge, you know, for years to come as to what.
I just mentioned it because there's typically a lot of walkers out there, but I think that side will have sidewalks that might help.
Yeah.
Just throwing out.
I think if we get intersection lights in a lot of our rural areas.
Yeah, so the Arcadian has planned for lights at the
Internally,
intersections. Yeah, and the new intersection that'll be on Waverly, there's a light planned there. But there's nothing like planned for a long Waverly.
But like I said, I'm sure they're having some other thefts. I've seen them out on the highway quite a bit.
Yeah,
but I
the first
haven't
time
seen
here,
them
yeah, I'll mention it to the sheriff.
Well, along those lines, I'll just share our 83rd Street Sidewalk project. All of our construction signs were stolen,
Really?
and our
You took our street
stop
shop?
slow paddles.
You didn't check the street shop, did you?
Yeah, well, I was gonna check with Ron just to see if they got picked up, but yeah, those, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we had to rush some paddles out so they could make the concrete pour yesterday. So. Not to, were you done, Kevin? I jumped in on the end of it.
I am done.
All right.
I just want to make sure everybody knew there was some theft going on.
Rob?
I was gonna say, I had nothing until you guys started mentioning the sheriff. Our current temporary deputy that's assigned to us is doing a good job, and so there may not be an interview process for the DeSoto deputy, which, having been around him and talked to him and having seen him go through academy and kind of come up for a while, would be fine with me, but that's kind of the update on that. He's actually shown up here a couple times, as you've seen, so he's doing good.
All right. Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you. Lori?
I have nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin
I
Hunter?
have nothing.
All right, thank you. So I have one thing, is the mayor's tree lighting will be Saturday night, 6 o'clock, starting with the merriment, and I have somewhere around 20 to 25 first and second graders that are gonna come up and sing with me. We're gonna do the song that we did last year on the video to ring in Santa, so before right at the lighting or right before the lighting. So if you have an opportunity, come up and share the event. And that's all I got.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're
I'm
adjourned.
sorry, but